Hey everybody, it's the Shaw sisters back again. I'm Wendy, and over here is the much better looking and much more impressive Heidi, and we're ready to go. We saw recently that National Geographic did an article about a chimp behavioral and linguistic project that took place some years ago. And the interesting thing for us is that we each spent close to 20 years on that project. So we know a little bit about that project, and we thought it might be fun to just share some memories about what it was like to work there.
Yeah, where to start when there's 20 years worth of experience? I'll start. I'll start
Yeah,
because I
because you
started there.
started for, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, when I was a
Okay.
kid, there was an in the news thing on Saturday morning, and it had a chimpanzee who was using a computer. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. It was like Dr. Doolittle, come alive, that somebody could talk to a chimpanzee. And that just stuck with me. And in my little head, I thought that was like zookeeper kind of thing. So I had in my mind, I wanted to be a zookeeper. And then when I was in high school, it's like I held on to that. And so I started looking into it, and I found this project where they were using sign language with a chimpanzee. So they didn't have to carry around a computer. They could just sign. And so I tracked down the project at the time, and the chimps that I had found were in Oklahoma. So I wrote to the director in Oklahoma and had a few go rounds, and he gave me advice about what I should do if I wanted to work with chimpanzees in sign language. And then when I was a senior, I wrote him again, and by then he had moved to Washington State. And so he actually basically said, I accept freshmen in my lab. So I said, okay, interesting. And so without even telling him, I hopped a bus. I got accepted to the university, hopped a bus and went out there um, and started working there as a freshman. And then a couple of years later, Rattles came through on her way off of the mountain
Yeah.
and stopped for a visit and came up to the lab with me and hung out for the few weeks that she had planned to stay there, and then decided, let's just stay. and, and so she started a few years after I did. And so that's how we ended up there. Where should we go from there? That was just how we got there.
It was. Um, I think the question that most people ask me when they find out that I work there. They want to know what it's like to work with chimps, but the first thing they're curious about is what level of intelligence are they? Is it like working with a 5-year-old? Is it like working with a 7-year-old? Is it like working with a 10-year-old?
Yeah.
And I think we can both say, no,
None. None of that. Yeah.
none of that. There
Yeah.
are levels at which when someone's pestering for gum, you might think you're dealing with a 7-year-old. There are also times when they're the adult and they've been through adult experiences and you're leaning on them when you're down. I guess what it comes down to is they're not human.
Yeah. They're
They're not human.
they're incredibly intelligent chimpanzees.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're not human and that's okay.
Yeah.
And
So
they think like chimpanzees. And I think one of the examples that I can remember from literature, not that we tested it there, was that if you were to put a human child and a chimpanzee in front of three colored boxes and hide a ball under one of them, and then you mix the boxes up, you take them away, and then you mix the boxes up and bring them back and ask them where the ball is. Of course, they didn't see you mix it up. They have no idea where the ball is. But the child's first instinct is to look under the box that's the right color. If they last saw it go under the red box, they're going to look under the red box. The chimpanzee's first instinct is to look at the ball in the location, look for the box in the location that it was. If it was under the middle box, they're going to look under the middle box. Both are, when you have no clues to where it is, both of those are equally intelligent strategies, but they're not the same strategies. And that's kind of, I guess that's what I would say about how they think
yeah.
is I would say equal, but different.
Yeah. So we got involved because of at the time they were focused primarily on the language still and had branched out to other topics. Linguistically, they actually start out signing well before human children talk and well before deaf children of deaf humans sign.
Yeah.
And
Darren
so
was signing it 3 months, wasn't he?
reliably,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Because I
But
remember
the
going back through the data.
early signs were even earlier than that. I
I
mean,
remember going back through some of that
yeah,
data
yeah,
and finding and being, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised because Dar's a smart guy,
yeah,
but going back and finding things very, very early where one after the other of their human companions was saying, Dar did this, and it looked
yeah,
like he was signing this. I can't, he's so young, I can't say that, but that's what it
yeah,
looked like.
yeah,
And it would be the same sign like over and over. The
yeah,
human companions were seeing him make at least baby forms of the signs and saying I can't have seen that because he's too young, but
yeah,
I'm going to record it anyway.
yeah. And the project that we were on had very strict standards for what it meant to call a gesture a sign. It was very, very rigorous. You had to have 3 different people see it on independent situations. They couldn't elicit it. They couldn't use the sign. The chimp had to produce it without having seen it in use. They had to see it for 15 consecutive days. So it was very, very strict, more strict than any human study of human infant vocabulary. So it wasn't just that they were, doing something and calling it a oh, that's a butterfly. That wasn't how it was. And so they developed vocabularies of well over 100 signs, and they would combine them into phrases, into 2 and 3 and more phrases. They would answer questions, ask questions, engage in conversations.
Yeah, just make small talk. Just make small
Yeah,
talk. I
yeah,
was sitting with Washa one day, and we were just hanging out, and she reached over and groomed her arm, just kind of groomed on her arm. And then she put her arm back down and she looked at me and said it was dirty there. No particular reason,
yeah,
just making small talk. We're hanging out. It's a casual comment.
yeah. And we
She
would
didn't
sit.
get a cookie for it.
Yeah, yeah. And she didn't ask for one either. Yeah,
No, no,
yeah.
it was just,
And so things that we would do on a daily basis would be to sit with the chimps with a book and look at the pictures in the book, and we'd sign what the things in the book, in the magazine or whatever were, and the chimps would sign, oh, that's a shoe, or oh, that's red, or that's black, or
I
yeah,
remember a day where there was a film crew there, and it was funny. There's no other way to think of it. Tatu's sitting there for 15, 20 minutes, leafing through a magazine, and she's signing black there, food there, flour. And the film crew is sitting there entranced, watching her do this. And I don't know if I was the one who was explaining, who was translating for her what she was doing. And when she finished the magazine and put it aside, the director of the film project turned to me and said, "Can you make her do that again?"
no,
We could give her another magazine, but no, she's finished reading that one. She probably isn't going to read it again.
yeah,
But
yeah.
the
It's hard for
difference
people to,
between the reality and the perception, I don't know what they were thinking that, that we could put her on display with that magazine. I don't know what they
yeah.
were.
But I think a lot of people, and even well-educated people, still think that they were trained animals. They were
Yeah.
trained to produce language, and they weren't trained. They were raised in an environment where language was part of it, and that was the way that you communicated with the adults that you were with, and eventually other chimpanzees that you were with.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't like you trained them any more than parents train their children to say their first words.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think you don't, And actually, we sometimes do treat kids in the same way. Like when parents, try to make their kids perform for grandma or whatever, and the little kid's like,
Yeah.
"Nope, I know that. No, I'm not going to do it." And the chimps are the same.
Yeah.
Are the same in that regard, where they're independent people, and you're not
Mhm.
going to make them perform any
Yeah.
more than you
In
can make a
fact,
kid.
Tatu rarely hesitated to tell you that the task was stupid.
Yeah,
If
yep,
you try, or she might indulge you for a couple of times, and about time number 7, she would
yep,
just tell you it was stupid
yeah, yeah,
and not do it anymore.
yeah. One of the things that I loved about working there was the great sense of humor that they had, and they would laugh about all sorts of things, and you had to establish a relationship with them, but you could tease them, and they understood teasing in the
Mhm.
same way that if you have a healthy relationship with somebody, you can tease them, and it's not bullying because it's a healthy relationship. And so, I mean,
And they would tease back. This was
yeah,
not a
yeah,
one-way thing.
yes, yes, yes. But I would tease Tatu about, I ate all the food, it's gone. And she would tell me, go, it's time to eat. And I'd say, I ate it all, it's finished. And eventually she would look at me like this. She would lean in, look at me and go, and this is a sign for a laugh or smile for the people out there. And so she recognized, you're kidding me. It's like, you're right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the same girl would, once we were doing a game of colors, or that was my intent anyway. And I had brought some things to play with and ask what color they were, and it didn't matter what the color was. I would say, "What color is this?" And she would say, "Black." And I would say, "Isn't it red?" "Black." And I'd show her something else, and that was black too. And every single thing in the room was black. And I even found a piece of white paper that came from a gum wrapper. And I showed it to her, and I asked her what color. She said it was black. I called Moja over to look at it, thinking maybe she'd take it from Moja if she wouldn't take it from me. And I said, "Moja, what color is that?" And Moja found a scrap of pink gum on it and pointed to it and said, "It's red there." So I went back to Tatu again and said, "What color is it?" And she said, "Paper, red, black." So she was willing to admit there was a scrap of red on it, but
Yeah.
she was still insisting the basic paper was black.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it happened to be my day to serve dinner that night. And when Tatu came in for dinner, she came up to me, and asked her if she was still being silly. And she said, "Black, black, 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 black." So she remembered what she was being silly about, and
Yeah.
she was perfectly willing to carry the joke on into dinner.
So one of the fun things about sign language is that it's a visual language. And so where if you're a little kid and you don't want to hear something, you have to like move your hands and put your hands over your ears. With sign language, all you have to do is close your eyes.
Yeah,
And
Lou
so
would do that all
often,
the time.
often Lulis, who was the youngest of the ones that we worked with, um, was also, he could be a little bit of a spoiled boy. And
He was just sensitive.
if he had done something that wasn't quite kind, like spit water, they never spit poop, by the way, or throw it or anything. But if he like spit water on you, and sometimes he would go and then go, and you'd start to say, that's not very nice. He would just go,
Yep.
and that was it. You couldn't reprimand him anymore. And sometimes he'd go, and if you were still saying no, he'd just go,
Yep. I remember from the early data, little Peely went through a phase. We didn't work with Peely, but we've worked with his data. And when he was little, he went through a phase where when somebody started to scold him, he would reach out and sign quiet on their mouth, which is both enormously adorable and enormously bratty.
yep.
But
It's like saying, hush, hush your mouth.
yes, yep, yep.
Yeah.
Do you remember Lou going through entire threat displays with his eyes
Yeah.
shut? And
Yeah.
normally when a chimp in those environments would do a threat display, he would just, it was a huge display, huge leaps from one wall to another and up on the benches and down on the floor. But he couldn't do that if he couldn't see. So he was, it was kind of cute actually. He would scrunch his eyes shut because if you pretend, we might pretend to cry if he behaved that way, and he couldn't stand to go through it if he thought you were crying. So to avoid seeing you crying, he would close his eyes really tightly, and then he would just make these funny little stilted hops from one place to another. Like he was,
Sometimes they'd take bowls and move them around.
yep, but those funny little hopping displays.
Yeah. So some of the things that people might not know that we just kind of take for granted are the fact that they brush their teeth, and not only do they brush their teeth with toothpaste, toothbrush and toothpaste, they use mirrors to open up and
Mhm.
look in their own mouths, and they use mirrors to groom themselves. They eat out of bowls, bowls with utensils, spoons. They, when given an opportunity, they use toilet. Not all of them, not all the time, but when we moved into the new building and installed toilets, they hadn't used toilets in a long time, and that's it for another day. But Tatu would hop on and use the toilet, and they were all potty trained when they were little.
Yeah, I
I
actually
mean,
saw her scold Lewis one time when he was doing it off a ledge when there was a toilet right
right?
there,
Yeah.
and
What did what did she do?
she said potty there.
Oh, nice.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, but not at what he was doing at where he
At
was supposed to
the
be doing it.
yeah, at the
Yeah,
potty. Yeah.
at the potty. She was,
Yeah.
yeah, she
Yeah.
she wouldn't have scolded him if there wasn't one right there in that room 10 feet away, but
Yeah.
it was there and he chose not to use it, and she
So one time I remember, and it would have been like around 1988 or 1989. So I was still pretty young, 19, 20, something like that. And Grandpa died, and I got the phone call at the lab. And actually it would have been before that, because I don't think you were there then.
I was.
Oh, you were.
I was, yeah. Because I remember using the old deck mate at the lab to
Oh,
write
okay.
a piece to send back for them to
Okay.
use.
Okay. But I remember getting the call when I was in the lab, and of course I was upset, and I went in, and I don't remember who the first one was because I got it from multiple chimps, but I remember Dar coming up to me and leaning in and saying, "You cry." And Washo and Tatu also came over and either said, "Notice the cry," or offered a hug. And I think their emotional, their empathy, and their recognition of a different species emotions, which of course are very similar to their own, but was remarkable. And
Yeah.
And
I went
that struck me.
I went in one day. Wasn't anything horrible going on. I was just long day, and I worked because I needed to make a living. I worked at a veterinarian in the morning, and then up to volunteer with the chimps in the afternoon. And I think something had happened there. I don't know if he lost a patient or something. But anyway, I walked in and I was just tired and not in a great mood, and walked back to say good morning to say hello to the chimps. And Tatu was sitting there, and I told her I was really tired. I said, "Can I come sit with you?" And her response was, "Come, you good friend." So it was kind of like she was saying, "Well, of course you can." It's like, we're friends. Of course you can sit with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she felt the need to say that, to express
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
And not, she could have just said come, or she could have ignored it. And patted the
Yep.
ground beside. She could have done any number of things, but she chose to express it
Yep.
in the way she did, which was very cool.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm. Oh, so many stories, so many stories.
Yeah.
Trying to think of other categories of things and things that people are surprised when they
Okay,
learn.
here's my favorite Dar story.
Okay.
There are two favorite Dar stories, but here's my absolute favorite Dar story. We did, were you there when we did the balloon party, or were you in Reno when we had the big balloon party?
I remember balloon parties, but I mean, there were lots of.
Yeah. Well,
So
we
go
did
ahead
a,
and tell it. Of course, the
yeah, we
audience
did a,
hasn't heard it.
no, they haven't heard it. We did a spectacular balloon party. Somebody donated a tank of helium,
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was there.
right? Because we were all hoping they were drinking the helium, and we were kind of hoping they would pant poop, but nobody did. Um, but what we did was we tied balloons to well, some of them we just let go up to the ceiling, and then we tied some to the top, so there's the big climbing structure, and then we tied them at different levels all the way down the climbing structure. And when we got to the ground, we tied them to toys and set them on the ground, and then the final layer on the bottom was balloons that were blown up with air and not helium, so they would skitter around on the floor. So the room was literally floor to ceiling balloons, and everybody had fun. Washo and Tatu kept sucking in the helium, and the others mostly batted them around, and Lula's kind of pounded on them, and but eventually the party was essentially over, and everybody went back to work, and I wasn't going to be there for that much longer, so I didn't really have a job at the moment, and all the chimps left the room, and Dar and I always had we were always buds. And so the chimps all left but Dar, and the people all left but me. And I just hung out there with Dar. And he had all these balloons on the floor. I don't know if we mentioned that these chimps grew up on a ranch,
Not
except for,
yet. We left out a lot of detail.
yeah. So when they were babies, they grew up on a ranch. They were around horses, they were around all that stuff. So Dar was there looking at the balloons and bumping them around a little bit. And then he got himself a brilliant idea. And he went into the other room, and he came back wearing a cowboy hat.
He loved cowboy hats.
Yep. And he got all of these balloons up between his feet, and he just started kind of scooting along on the floor,
He's riding
down low
his.
so that he could keep his hands around, and he was just herding the balloons around in his cowboy hat. And I think that is one of my absolute
Oh,
favorite
I
memories
love that.
of Dar.
Oh, that's so fun. Yeah.
Dar was a cowboy.
So his favorite thing, and I'm using favorite like our younger brother Dean uses favorite. One of his favorite things in the world was licorice rope. And especially the little thin stuff, but the ropes were good too. And he would save those. And so when they would get like a treat, Christmas, stocking was a Ziploc bag full of treats and stuff. He would hold that where a lot of kids and the chimps too would go for their favorite things. He would hold his favorite thing and he would eat everything else. And he just loved that licorice. And I always felt like, I don't know, almost like crying, I guess, because he would offer me a bite.
Oh, yeah, it's so sweet.
Oh, I love Dar. And it was so sad because sometimes he would hold it, and Washo, who was the dominant, kind of the matriarch of the group, would finish hers. And then because of their dominance hierarchy, she was entitled to take anybody else's. And it didn't match with our sense of right and justice. And so he would have saved his precious licorice for the last thing. And she would come over and he would start crying like a baby. And oh, this horrible crying sound, and
Mhm.
like offering Washo anything, please take the whole bag. Just don't take my licorice. And sometimes he would at least get a couple bites before she took it.
Yeah, yeah.
But
He is
he's a sweetie.
he's a sweetie. I remember him
Oh,
one day hanging from his toes on the ceiling, and he was in a room that was low. So it's not like he was dropping 30 feet to the floor or anything. He would, when he was hanging from his toes, he could he could easily touch the floor with his hands.
Yeah.
Um, and he looked at me, made this huge big play face, and dropped himself on his head. And I had
Oh,
a dual reaction because he looked so goofy that I couldn't help laughing. But I was like, "Don't do that! You're gonna hurt your head." But the fact that I laughed,
oh no.
he took it as egging him on, so he
Did it
did it
again.
again. And I was over there just cracking up because he was being so goofy, and at the same time signing over and over, stop it, you're gonna hurt your head." But of course, he wasn't really.
Right, right, right.
We don't have skulls like their skulls, but all I could think of was what it would feel like to drop myself on my head like that.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
we
yeah.
watch, we would routinely watch him and Lulis backhand thumping on each other's skulls with the force that would crush
Break
a
our
human
necks.
skull, and they're
Yeah.
both laughing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they are not built exactly like we are,
Yeah.
but he was
So,
willing to do it over and over to make me laugh.
yeah. One of my favorite stories that the gardeners told, again, I've got many of them, but um, was that Dar would they would get those activity boards for like for kids that
Oh
had like
yeah.
the old style telephone dial and a knob like was on the old time TVs and um, zippers
Sliders.
and
Yeah.
sliders and things, um, doors to open and levers to push, and they would give one to Dar and he would immediately break it, and by breaking it, it meant that he would take the back, like he would like break it to get the pieces separated. And finally somebody smartened up and realized that he just liked mechanical things and he wanted to see how they worked. And so that was what they were thinking. And so they got another one and they deliberately took the back off, and he never broke it. He just needed to see the how the mechanism worked
Yeah.
on the back,
Yeah.
and that was just kind of consistent with his personality of he just liked knowing how things worked.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Lewis, on the other hand, did not care how things worked.
He tried to figure out Ziploc bags.
He never did. He pretty
Teeth
much always
worked.
opened his Ziploc bags by grasping the zipper end and bashing the other end of it on the ceiling until he broke it.
Well, in his defense, he would try, and he would try, and he would try, and then he would do that. Yeah.
Just,
But so Lulis, just for to clarify, Lulis was actually raised in a lab, um, in more or less a deprived environment. So he didn't have the exposure that the other chimps did to all sorts of different kinds of activities and objects and
yeah, when he was a
enrichment
baby.
and
Yeah.
social relationships and all sorts of things. Yeah. And actually,
Yeah.
one more thing about Lulis is that he actually learned how to sign from the other chimps, from
Mhm.
his mom, who was Washoe, adopted mom, Washoe, and from the other chimps. And so
Yeah.
he was second generation.
And the fact that he did actually put another layer into play that I think people don't really understand. I think it's worth mentioning because he at the time that he was there were scientists out there saying because they all learned language, to the extent that most people would call it language, but there were still people out there saying it isn't really language unless there's cultural transmission, unless it passes from one generation to the next. So there was a project done when he was little to avoid exposing him to sign, to make sure that his signs came from the other chimps. But that meant that the other chimps who had spoken nothing but ASL from the time they were 2 days old suddenly had to learn English. And they had to become completely proficient in understanding English because you couldn't sign in front of Lulis. And there are videos out there where Tatu is being asked to make a certain sign. She's being asked to, sign banana or sign whatever the sign was. And what people don't understand about that they think, oh yeah, you're telling the chimp to do something. You're telling her to make a sign. And what you're asking her to do is to translate from a language that she learned as a young adult to her native language, which is ASL. And a lot of us humans, especially in America, don't even bother to learn a second language, much less become that quickly proficient at translating between those two languages.
Yeah. That was actually my master's thesis.
Cool.
Yep. Asking Tatu to sign. Yeah, can you sign Roger? Can you sign drink? Can you sign eat? Can you sign?
And how far would she let you get through it before she started signing stupid?
She only did that a few times. Yep. And I think stupid was probably one of the signs too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we should kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, we're getting there time-wise.
Yeah. It was such a big, it was at the time, it's kind of interesting because you just don't hear about it anymore. So it surprised me to have National Geographic actually do an article on it.
Yeah.
Right now, there's sadly, there are only 2 of the chimps who we worked with who are still alive, and they're up in a Canadian sanctuary called Fauna Foundation. And so Tatu and Lulis are still living, and Washo, Moja, and Dar have passed away. But it's kind of sad for me that it's not in the news more, because the results are so striking. And what's striking to me about the findings is that they are just so incredibly like humans in almost every way. And a lot of the things that were just kind of common knowledge in the heyday are sort of gone out of society's memory. Yeah. And I would love to be able to bring those findings back in a digestible way for people.
Yeah. Can we end on one of Tatu's jokes on me?
I think that would be a fun way to end.
We had a garden outside the outdoor enclosure, and there was squash in it, and beans and berries and a bunch of stuff. And I was there with Tatu, and it was late fall, and the garden was essentially dead, and there was nothing growing anymore. And I was interested in the fact that Tatu knew, she seemed to recognize the plants without, the remains of the plants without the stuff growing on them. And I just thought it was cool that she knew that. So I started asking her, pointing to different plants and asking her what they were. And she was easily identifying each of them. But then it was my turn. So she pointed to a plant for me to identify. And I was looking at it. It's like, is that a weed or is that an old squash plant? I am not sure what that is. Finally, I said, I don't know. What is that? And she said, plant.
Very good. It's just a plant. It's just a plant.
Yep, gave me a hard one. Even she couldn't identify that one. But anyway.
All righty. So, anything for the good of the order?
No, I think we've got it. But if anybody has questions, they're certainly welcome to throw them in the comments. Maybe we can do another chimp recollection episode. There was so much that we learned there, so much that and so much, and certainly so many stories of
yeah.
Of,
so many
of
life
our
lessons.
Time there.
So many life lessons.
Yeah. Life lessons. And we've also since worked with a lot of the data from when they were infants, and some of that data has some very interesting outcomes and some very interesting data, but also some very adorable stories that I think the public should hear someday.
Yeah, I think so. All righty. So we will shut the light off.
Shut the light off. We'll
shut
do
the
that.
light off.
Yeah.
All righty. So we will see you folks next time. Bye. Thanks.
Next time. Cheers.